Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first ITPro Live panel session of the week. My name is Dale Walker, and I'm the Deputy Editor of ITPro, and I'll be acting as moderator for this afternoon's session. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be talking about something that I'm sure many of you will have had to grapple with over the past few months, and that's the issue of innovating while working remotely. Before I begin, I'd first like to introduce our panelists, and I'm pleased to say we have a nice range of industries represented here today, so we should get some interesting perspectives. I'm joined today, firstly, by Richard Rawcliffe, Vice President of UK Public Sector at Dell Technologies. We also have Rob Chapman, CEO of Firebrand Training.
Hello.
We also have Laura Crow, Head of IT Services at Newcastle Building Society.
Hi.
And also joining us is Peter O'Rourke, IT Director at the University of Suffolk. Welcome to you all.
Good afternoon.
So the last few months have been, as Paul Chapman put it earlier in our show, an experiment for most, but not exactly an experiment that many of us wanted to actually conduct. The lockdown was forced most businesses and the workers to adjust to new ways of working while still meeting all the demands associated with their roles. Businesses still need to innovate and remain competitive, but how do they do that when they have a dispersed workforce? I think a good way to start this would be to get I think it would be really insightful actually to get a sense of how much the lockdown has changed remote working policies across your respective organizations and professions. That is, how much was being done remotely before versus now. So let's have Richard kick us off, if that's all right.
Yes, no problem at all. I think to a certain extent, being part from a technology company, we'd already started a flexible working program, probably as far back as 2009. The idea being that we want to try and get more and more people to be able to flexible in what they work and not necessarily be office based. And I guess we probably got up to about 65% of our people had the option to work remotely, and our workforce is about 150,000 by the time we came into this current crisis. And at any one time, I think we had 30 or 40,000 people logging in remotely. Then in the space of literally a week or so, we moved to 120,000 people being completely remote and accessing the systems remotely. We were fortunate in that we could scale that solution. I think what we found was that, I think I saw some stats in the first couple of weeks that we went from something like 60,000 Zoom hours a day as a business to 180,000 Zoom hours a day in the space of a week. So business became conducted by Zoom in effect. So all those physical meetings became video meetings, but because we weren't doing it in isolation, we weren't alone in this. All of our customers were in the same position. It's almost like the whole world suddenly almost changed in the UK on March the 30th, if not before, when lockdown started. So we were fortunate in that we had the infrastructure in place. We had to sort people out with the right things to have at home. So a lot of my team need dual screens, they need soft phone licenses, those sort of things. So we had to get the right technology out there. But I think people settled pretty quickly into a new routine to a certain extent. So it was fairly seamless and almost an adventure for the first couple of weeks. You know, oh, we're all working from home now, we can't go anywhere, we're talking to our customers from home, etc. I think over time it's matured into something slightly different, which we may cover a bit later on. I think it's become harder, not easier, almost from a mental health perspective, almost as time's gone on for people, and that's an important thing to recognise in the workplace. So for us, it's been how do you monitor that going on as well. So I guess that's a flavour of how it has been for us.
Great, thank you. Rob, I guess we'll move to you just because you're next to Richard on my screen.
I suppose before the coronavirus struck, we were in a kind of a mixed mode of a very office-centric kind of business in both the product that we're selling, but also the way that we did it. So we've got offices in London, Nijmegen, which is in the Netherlands, and Cologne in Germany. And then we've got training centres in the same countries, but outside of those physical locations. And our training product up until this point, or before the coronavirus, was very much in the classroom, in person. You know, that's how you delivered the training. Our staff were probably 2/3 based in one of these offices or the training centres, and maybe 1/3 based at home. The remote working is kind of an interesting story for the kind of the history of Firebrand. So myself and business partner Stefano Capaldo started back in 2001, and he was actually based in New York and I was based in Fulham. We did a typical bootstrap of working out of our studies. So actually right from day one, we were kind of working from home as a startup does, using what was then called MSN Messenger to communicate with each other pre-video, because it was still dial-up modems. And then over time, as we've got offices, we've also found that some members of staff have naturally needed to work from home. So we do apprenticeships in the UK, for instance. So we have learning mentors that are spread across the UK, and it would be totally impractical to have offices for all of them. So they tend to be work from home. And then some of the sales staff have worked from home in the main European marketplaces. And then some of the kind of slightly quirky things that have happened with the remote working before the coronavirus is we've got a couple of salespeople that are very nomadic. So we've currently got one that's based in northern Thailand, selling into the German marketplace. So she dials in, using a soft phone and talks to customers there. And we've got a Swiss guy based in Sochi in Russia, does similar sorts of things into different marketplaces. So we kind of had the technology in place to do all of this because we've been a big Microsoft shop for many years. So, we were Skype for Business and we'd already moved over to Teams. I was hinting in that when we were in the green room beforehand, one of the things we did about 18 months ago is we got everybody video cameras, because I'm also responsible for culture in the company. And I really wanted to try and get some of that sort of face-to-face connection with people. So when this happened, we already had webcams for all staff. And it was kind of the lockdown was approaching, we were sort of making sure everyone had the right soft phone. Did they have to have a laptop at home? We knew we had video cameras, and we were already in this mode of talking to each other over video. We've also got quite a structured kind of daily huddle kind of thing that goes on, and then regular weekly meetings. And moving those into the cloud was really straightforward for us. The hardest bit, which possibly comes on to later conversation, is we were an in-person training company who suddenly couldn't have people in the classroom. So I'll park that one for the moment. I think we'll get onto that one. But so we were in a mixed mode, and we've I think done a pretty good job seamlessly of kind of pivoting to being everybody working from home, and that's still the mode that we're in now.
Great, thank you. Thankfully, we're no longer relying on MSN Messenger, which is great. Laura, I'll go to you now if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Pretty much office-based, really, pre-COVID. So we've got 2 head offices in the northeast of England, about 31 branches spread in and around the northeast. About 1,250 colleagues, and of them, probably around 200 had the ability to work remotely through laptop and VPN technology, but pretty much everyone probably still came into the office most days. We've got Newcastle Strategic Solutions is one of the companies under the MBS Group umbrella, and we are the UK's leading savings management platform provider for other financial institutions. And what that means is we've got quite a sizable kind of customer service centre supporting those banks and building societies. And again, the telephony platform, we didn't have any soft phone technology at the time. Everyone pretty much, like I say, came into our head offices. We had invested in our technology roadmap had seen some investment in Citrix Workspace. So when we could foresee that lockdown was coming, we were quite quick to enable remote working for a lot of the, I guess, administrative and back office functions, and got everyone out of the offices reasonably quick, within days, in fact. But it was that soft phone technology piece that we took us just that little bit longer to get enabled, to allow those customer service colleagues to get home. And we've done that with a range of devices as well. So we've had to introduce bring your own device. Again, that wasn't something that was part of our tech setup. We've done not dissimilar to Richard. We've allowed colleagues to take whatever they needed from the office, whether that's extra monitors, peripherals, your keyboard, your mice, to really make sure that they could be as efficient and productive at home. And I think that's really helped. We've had a lot of positive feedback from that. But for us, it certainly felt, absolute baptism of fire from, everyone kind of seeing each other in the office pretty much every day. We've probably got less than 100 colleagues where some roles are still needed on site, and then we've retained our branch network. So with the exception of one, which was in a shared location, we've kept the branches open, fully reconfigured to support social distancing guidelines. But we've continued to service face-to-face customers all the way throughout. So that's also been really positive. So quite a journey in terms of the remoteness, the flexibility that it's allowed people. We were piloting Teams at the time, so we're using MS Teams extensively now across the group. Unfortunately, unlike Rob, hadn't invested in webcams. We did manage to get. How we done it, I've got no idea, because you're right, they were harder to get than toilet bowls. But we managed to get them and actually put them in our branch network, and that's allowed a different experience for them in terms of keeping in touch with their colleagues. But that's possibly one thing that we were a little bit slow on. We didn't have the webcams for some colleagues, so it's great if their personal devices got that functionality for them, but if not, they're using Teams on mobile phones and such like to make sure that video conferencing is available to them.
Okay. Peter, over to you, please.
Hi, good afternoon. We're probably a little different to most in that we, as a university, we've got an interesting mix in that students are very much central to what we do, and the experience that we can offer to students has to be absolutely core to what we try to deliver. So we had an interesting challenge when this first hit us. So if you look at students, we're very fortunate in that a couple of years ago, the Learning Services team had taken the decision to switch virtual learning platforms, and the platform they picked is absolutely brilliant at delivering teaching remotely. So academic colleagues were able to, with an awful lot of work, it has to be said, literally within a week or two, were up and delivering remote classrooms. So that got us through that initial period. So park that for a moment, because universities are in an interesting space just now. We're all planning for September, and I guess we'll talk about that in a while. From a staffing perspective, we've been using Teams for probably a couple of years, but I have to say that engagement has improved radically in recent months for fairly obvious reasons. So that's a benefit that happened. We've got a lot of ad hoc remote support services that have been put there to cope with occasional use. And what happened within a week, those ad hoc systems were coping with everybody working from home. And they've stacked up very, very well. There are rough edges that we know we want to fix going forward. But like a lot of other people, we ran into the similar challenge of, have we got laptops we can give to people? Have we got webcams we can give to people? You know, we've got colleagues who've had to borrow their friend's computer to work from home in some instances. But so we had this mad scramble for a week whilst we tried to get everybody up and running. And huge amounts of goodwill. I mean, I'm sure others would say the same thing. You know, let me be clear. That first couple of weeks was hugely challenging for everybody involved, not just those of us in IT, but colleagues, students, who were all getting our head around different ways of trying to do things. But what was really impressive throughout was just the huge amount of goodwill that came through from just about everybody, which got us over that first couple of weeks when there were probably some very odd things going on, and services that we'd really started to drive, which we'd never driven in anger before, they got a bit flaky around the edges, so we needed to tune them. Users need to be a bit understanding with us, but we got there. And I would say that within a couple of weeks, it might be slightly different. It might have been slightly slower. The process might have been different. There was almost nothing that we needed to deliver day to day that we weren't able to do remotely. And had very controlled access to our buildings. I mean, the universities remained open throughout, and we're very proud of that. But actually, with most of us working at a distance, but laptops, but phones, but reliability, and home broadband has been a revelation. Watching a technical person trying to understand why a user doesn't have home broadband, discuss, or your broadband is how slow, has really it's really tested the limits of people's customer service skills, because there's a very definite sense of does not compute. And without getting into the conversations we'd like to have later, actually what that's then driven is an interesting set of challenges as we look towards opening up for September and thinking, how much of this can we make a face-to-face experience for students, because we must. It's a very important part of what a university has to deliver, and therefore what does that mean for us as staff? So if I'm in an office occupying that office, that could be teaching space. So we're starting to look at those sorts of things now. So there's that on our agenda. And the other thing, I think, as Richard mentioned, that became quite clear quite quickly, is that although we've had for a long, long time, we pride ourselves on the ability to allow people to work flexibly. That, by and large, in most people's mind, did not include working at home. Despite the fact we've always said, if you need to do that, you can. And actually, we're now really delivering on our flexible working core value in a huge way. But have now got the reverse problem that there are quite a lot of people who, for various reasons, can't or don't want to work from home, don't want to work from home that much. There's some very practical things in terms of what your local caring responsibilities are, who's around you, those sorts of things. So these are all new things that we're having to take on and try and work with colleagues to go, okay, how are we going to make this work for you going forward? But I think central to it, what's been really amazing, not just for ourselves, but across the entire HE sector, is how quickly it's adapted and implemented something that actually it's been trying to do for many years. And there are some amazing people in the sector who've done amazing things for years, who are now going, look, see, I told you could do this, and I was right all along. So we're looking forward to the future.
Great stuff, thank you. I think you raised a couple of interesting points there we'll probably pick up soon. I wanted to, you all kind of touched on the idea of accommodating for people in terms of technology. Not everyone is going to have the same access to technology, not everyone is going to have the same setup. Their working environment in the office is going to be completely different to what it is at home. With that in mind, I think if we go back to Richard, what do you think? How do you feel working remotely has affected innovation in terms of has it been easier or harder to be as creative as you used to be in a typical working environment? Is it a case of businesses seem to just be in a holding pattern right now until they get out of this, or are there opportunities to actually do something while we're in lockdown?
It's an interesting question. There was a meme thing going around in the early days, and I saw it again today on LinkedIn, which basically said, what drove the digital transformation of your business? Was it A, your CEO, B, your CIO, or C, COVID-19? With COVID-19 is circled, because for a lot of organizations, and we've heard some of it here today, the push to actually have to innovate in order to survive as businesses and as institutions has been driven by this current crisis. So if I'm going to continue to talk to my customers and deliver the services, I can no longer have 200 people in a call center. I can no longer deliver my teaching and training in a direct face-to-face way, but I can't just stop doing these things. So I think it's been a fast driver for some digital adoption in the first instance. I think where traditionally you might have gathered together a team around a whiteboard, if you're of my age demographic, and sort of like brainstorm things that way. I think you've come now to see there's different ways of doing that. There is technology available to allow you to share things. Teams is something that we were just starting to adopt, and as Laura said, we've accelerated that very quickly, and suddenly it's expanded exponentially. Yeah, I think I'm probably a member of too many teams now, so a little bit of team sprawl. We used to talk about things like server sprawl, but team sprawl is a little bit of an interesting one. But also, I think I mean, we're looking at different innovations now. So I don't know, we're talking to a number of organizations about return to work solutions. But they're things like, how do I measure temperature at the front desk? How do I actually monitor temperature of people actually moving around the organization without them necessarily knowing I'm doing it? How do I manage traffic flow in terms of people? So there are certain innovations that have been driven by the need to get institutions and businesses back to work. So I think an initial hiatus, to Peter's point, was people got out and got used and got settled into things. But I've probably spent more time talking to people that work in my business and with my customers in terms of minutes of dialogue in the last 2 or 3 months than I have in the previous 6 months, because it's almost instantaneous. I can do 6 or 7 hours of meetings if I choose to do so. I've got zero travel time other than navigating from one system maybe to the next. So I think it's given the opportunity to innovate. I think the better organizations have taken that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Rob, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, if I talk about Firebrand's experience, so over the last 19 or so years, we've trained somewhere in the region of 80,000 people, and it's always been in a classroom. So whether it's been kind of the IT certifications, which started off being our bread and butter, whether it's as we've moved into apprenticeships over the last sort of 5 years, is essentially in a classroom. And we've been, I suppose, to put it in simple terms, quite anti, e-learning, which is kind of different, but anti-online, because we've always believed this face-to-face experience where the instructor can see the student, see if someone's struggling. That's kind of how you maximize the knowledge transfer, which ultimately is what someone's paying for, right? So we had a very stark choice when this happened and the lockdown came along, because in all the markets we're in, essentially our training rooms had to shut. And our tech team did an incredible job of, within 2 weeks, beated and then started offering and delivering what we call OIL, so online instructor-led training remotely. But the jigsaw puzzle of our product, there's essentially like 3 components, because there's courseware, which we take typically from vendors. So, the Microsofts, the Ciscos, the ISC Squares. Over the last 5 years, a lot of those have moved towards doing electronic versions, but not all of them have. So we still, even if someone's participating remotely, you still have to physically ship something out to them if there's an electronic version of it. But then the other massive part of our business model is all of our courses lead to an IT certification. And there's a lot of fidelity around those IT certifications because they're worth a lot. And not all vendors have managed to move those to being remote proctored. So we can still offer the product and deliver, with an instructor remotely and the students remotely, but not all components can be sort of available for all of the, the couple of hundred products that we maybe are delivering at any one time. So those sorts of challenges. But what we have proved to ourselves is that this model does work. And I think the simple decision we took, even though it created complexity, was we weren't going to break the way that we delivered training to try to fit it into an online version of it. We would continue doing what we did. So for us, with boot camps, essentially, it's, you turn up and you live, breathe, sleep, eat something 12 hours a day. And we had people going, it will never work when they're dialing in from, their study at home or whatever. And I've seen some of my competitors break their model up to try to accommodate online and then run into all sorts of other unintended consequences. So, we've been through this rapid innovation in this our traditional kind of the bread and butter of our product, and absolutely works. If I go and look at our Trustpilot reviews, the reviews we're getting and the number of stars is no different than it was before the lockdown, and we're still doing these 12-hour days. And in fact, had some wonderful stories, like courses being taught by an instructor in Portugal to students that may be spread across Europe. We've had somebody dialing in from the Cayman Islands to a course that's being run on Central European time. So they've had to get up at whatever it is early in the morning to join the class. And then the other way around, we've had a lady in the Middle East, in a country that technically speaking shouldn't be allowed access to technologies like Zoom and Teams. I maybe won't sort of out myself, but somehow managing to get around all those firewalls and sitting through a 10-day straight course to learn, I think it was a Six Sigma training product. And when they registered to pay for this course, we did contact them. So look, as far as we can tell, you shouldn't be able to get access to the technologies you need to be able to participate. And they kind of went, don't worry about it, we've got ways round this. Okay, buyer beware and all that. So yeah, like loads of innovation to continue our as I say, the bread and butter of our products. And the proof is essentially we can continue to do it post whether people can come back to the classroom, which, as it happens, they are coming back to the classroom, because we've, in all the markets we're in, we're now operating back in the classroom, but in this hybrid model, so instructor in the classroom with some students and everyone else dialing in. But then, as a sort of a slight parallel to this, and appreciate I'm taking up a lot of time now, but we've also launched a product set which is just about remote learning. So we call it Sprint, and they're very short sessions. And that's going to be a series of weekly things, many of them free, some of them chargeable kind of thing. So we have actually used it to kind of spur us on to generate a new revenue stream. Early days, yeah, admittedly, and something we've been talking about for a while. So I've kind of been under a lot of pressure and stress over the last 3 months for obvious reasons, but it's also amazing to see what you can achieve when you put your mind to it, and more importantly, what the company and the staff can achieve when they put their mind to it.
Great stuff. I think, Peter, I think I'm going to come to you now, just because I think there might be some parallels there with some of the things that Rob's been talking about from the educational side, if you don't mind picking up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was kind of sitting here thinking we should, Rob and I need to catch up, because you've probably tackled a lot of the problems that we're now thinking hard about, how we do. I think, as I said before, one of our key things in terms of our core offering to students is how you make sure you've still got that very engaged style of delivery, because it is really, really important. So we are currently working through trying to plan timetables for next year, based around whichever measure of social distancing might be in charge today, or might be in charge in 2 months' time, or indeed might be imposed upon us if we have a broader second wave and lockdown, or maybe even local issues. So we're having to think through all of those possible variants and plan the year ahead, so that we can make sure that the experience we deliver is the right one for our students. So again, we're having to look very, very hard at what is it that we're trying to deliver, and how do we need to break that up into chunks that will allow us to actually get that across to our students in any of those circumstances that might arise, bearing in mind that we'll have some students who want to be on campus with us, some who want to be but can't, and we're going to have to think about how we do a very sort of mixed mode of delivery. So and I'm not doing it, I'm just, if you like, the bridge builder in all of this. I've got to make sure that our core infrastructure can support what we're trying to do. So I can't take any credit for the work that's going on, because it's actually being done by our academic colleagues who are, as we currently talk, are out there working to some interesting timetable challenges in terms of, this is a teaching space, and it looks like a teaching space. This is a specialist lab. So, for instance, most universities will have a health component. So actually, if you do social distancing in what is in effect a hospital ward, that's kind of a bit of an odd thing to do, because if if students are going to be working in that environment in the real world, well, actually, they're not going to be practicing social distancing the way that you might do on another course. So having to think through and make it real for them has been really innovative in terms of people then coming back and going, well, actually, why don't we just make it look like a hospital ward and operate it that way, through to then colleagues in other courses who've then said, well, actually, we may not be able to quite do it that way, but we're working with dangerous chemicals in dangerous environments. Well, actually, we could work a whole lot closer if we think about, well, how do we prepare for being in that space? Some fantastic thinking going on there. One of the things that has fascinated me throughout this period, however, is if you step away from the technology for a moment, has been how colleagues have adapted, and suddenly changing business process has become a whole lot easier than it was 6 months, a year ago, because we've removed the barriers. We in effect, because we're all having to adapt to new circumstances, and I've got a problem, I need your help solving it. I'm more prepared to change what I'm doing to accommodate you. So actually, there's been some really interesting examples of processes that have probably been too paper-based for too many years, where people have suddenly gone, do you know what, we could do it this way, would that work? And that's been really, really quite interesting. And it hasn't really required any technology to do it. It's just the circumstance that's changed, and it's given people permission to then look at problems in a whole new way. And I think that's really quite exciting as we move forward. So, every day we'll come up with a new problem, and we're now getting half a dozen different ways of going, well, we could do this. We've never done that before. Should we try it this way? Which I think is really important. So don't always focus on the technology. I think there's a danger that if you rush out and try and implement too shiny, too new, too quick, actually the learning curve will get you. But the people in your teams already know how to do their work. They know where the challenges are. They know where the bottlenecks are. So if you can just find ways of helping them think through and go, okay, what can we use to make this work for you? Actually, they're very well placed, and they're coming up with some brilliant ideas.
Okay, great, thank you. Laura, how do you think lockdown has affected innovation from your perspective?
I think we were a little nervous to start with. We have kind of multidisciplinary platform teams who, they're developing code, new features and functionality all the time for our clients, and they rely a lot on those, the Scrum ceremonies, getting everyone together, innovating together, paid programming, and obviously picking those teams up and sending them all home. We were maybe a little bit nervous about would the pace of change slow? Would we be a little bit slower to market with new features? And really, we've been proven entirely wrong. I think they've adapted hugely well. Granted, I think there's an element of they've taken really strong working relationships home with them because they were already established teams. But our pace of change, if anything, has significantly increased. We had a notification back that May was one of our record months for kind of getting new features and functionality into life for our clients. We've done like a record number of releases with the same number of people. So I think they're working really hard and wanting to deliver change. And I think to a little bit of they're probably seeing the ability to take a little bit more accountability, to adapt those business processes, as Peter said, to make sure that we're making the right decisions and not taking any greater risk, but making sure that we can deliver with pace. And then I think there's great opportunity, much wider across the business. We've been looking at how to remote onboard. All our recruitment practices are changing. Our onboarding and of new colleagues. We did pause on recruitment for a little period of time whilst everything kind of settled, but we've just went back out to market with a great number of new technology roles. And so we're thinking about what does that mean for getting colleagues into the business, but also, how do you onboard them onto our culture and make them feel part of the teams? And similarly to Richard's point, we're looking at what does our office space now need to be. I think we've got a great opportunity, whilst it's so has such low occupancy, to really make sure that it's ready for the world that it needs to support when colleagues are coming back into the office, and that includes all the things that Richard talked about around temperature check-in, or what does it mean for meeting room technology to make sure that if you've got a hybrid model, that colleagues feel connected and can still work in a really engaged way, if some of them are at home and some of them are in the office. So I think we're sensing and grasping at the opportunity, really, and I think we've absolutely seen a greater pace of change, and I think that'll definitely continue, or I'm certainly hoping it's going to continue, in all honesty.
Okay, well, that leads me quite nicely onto I think we've got time for one more question, perhaps. I wondered if you could all give your perspectives on what you feel the next couple of months will look like in terms of returning to the office, and certain whether or not some of these practices that you guys have put into place or you've been part of are likely to continue, if there's any merit in any of them continuing, particularly when it comes to things like offering more working from home hours, recruitment, things like that. Is working from home going to be an attractive skill to have on a CV? That ability to work well at home. Are these the sorts of things that the businesses might be considering? So if we can go to Rob first, if that's okay.
Yeah. I suppose I've got a fear about kind of what's coming next, but not fear of the coronavirus, but fear about kind of, and a couple of the other panel members have touched on this, is people are starting to get worn down, I think, by working from home, spending all day like this, staring at a video screen. And I found myself thinking, and again, sort of been echoed by other people, you seem to be working harder when you're remote than when you're actually in the office. And I've had conversations with members of staff that sort of say, actually, being in an office and the flow of conversation breaks things up a little bit, which, in one sense is a negative because it slows you down, but this clearly gives you a little bit of breathing space, which you don't tend to get when you bounce from one video call to another. But more fundamentally than that, go back to that culture word, we've built a very strong culture as a business over 19 years. But, we've invested a lot in the culture, and, the package of being employed by us, more than money, the kind of the bells and whistles, if you like. And then that means there is a human connection between the staff, which I think during these sorts of crises, and hopefully this is the only one I'm going to experience in my lifetime, it's a platform to which you've got strength. But if we continue to be very, very distant and remote, and there's another one of these maybe in 5 years' time, I wonder whether the same sort of bonds and connections are going to be there. And much like we found in the classroom, you can do things to emulate that connectivity, and you can be conscious of it, but it's a lot harder to make it work when you're remote. So, there's a pre and post pandemic kind of answer to this question. Clearly, during the pandemic, forcing staff into an office, if your government says you can't, that's a non-starter, right? So if we talk about post some form of lockdown where we're allowed to go into the office, I think very much that we're going to, if you like, insist some level that people are in the office, a few times a week, but recognizing that a lot more people can work from home. That changes your office space requirements, doesn't it? Because, if you've got 50 desks and you've got 60% of the people can work from home, maybe you now only need 20 desks, not 50, sort of thing. You have to organize yourself in a different way, potentially. So, culture is the thing that's kind of important to maintain, because I want people to want to come to work. And, coming to work is the bit that's changed. Is it physically in an office, or is it dialing into your Teams call? Maybe the money that people save on their offices, they invest in their staff welfare. I don't know. Maybe it's you have more social engagements once we're allowed to go to the pub again, whatever it is. Or maybe it's, masseurs or gym memberships that you can do locally. I don't know. But I think that there'll be another wave of innovation of how do we build a new company on this kind of new technology platform that recognises that people are remote workers and helping them, I suppose. So yeah, I'm always optimistic about the future, and there's a lot of questions that don't have answers at the moment about what shape Firebrand will be from a staff perspective. The shape of the business is more clear, somewhat ironically.
Okay, great. Laura, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to take Rob's idea of how we loop the property saving money back into the social one, so that's a win for today. I think, yeah, I mean, echoing a lot of Rob's points really. I think colleagues are starting to ask about when they can come back. I think there's a lot telling us that people do miss that human interaction that they have with their colleagues. And so what I can say is that we will have very much a hybrid approach, that if we will have offices that you can come into, and whether that's you have to book your desk, or there's a bank of regularly cleaned hot desks, whatever that might be in the new world, then there is that option there for colleagues. But the technology that we've stood up to support remote working, we envisage continuing to support that and developing that as much as we can, to make sure that colleagues have a choice. One of my team kind of frequently says, we need to remember work is something you do and not somewhere you go. And it's almost like a language change. People often talk about going to work, and that involves the travel, the commute, and getting into the office. But actually, there needs to be it's a bit of a mindset change for people. But that ability to break up, make sure you've got real division of home and work life, which I think is hard for some people, particularly when they are working very long hours in your own house all the time. We want them to have that choice. And I think, again, that'll, for me, in our experience, that's created a lot of the strong culture that we've got in our organisation, and that's a key learn. We want to keep that culture. I think we've had really strong, authentic communication as an organisation throughout COVID, and that cultural element has been really strong, and has really made people feel supported and safe. And we just need to make sure that we focus on that and not let the technology be the thing that drives it. It should be who do we want to be as an organisation that drives how we work going forward.
Okay. Richard, Peter, I'm very keen to get you in. We've got a couple of minutes left. If we could just briefly get your answers before we finish. So over to Peter first, if that's okay.
Hi, just to pick up on where Laura's really ended. I think the safety and the well-being of our staff and students is central to everything we do. It's very clear that we've got colleagues who are absolutely, just bursting to get back into the office just for human contact, and we've got other people who quite like what they're doing. We'll have a mix going forward. We're very definitely setting ourselves up so that people will be able to work from wherever makes sense for them to work. There are some quite amazing environmental impacts if we can encourage more people to work from home. So why shouldn't we? We've proved that we can do it. So cutting down on that travel time, but that doesn't mean that we should turn that travel time into work time, because again, we've got some people who are now working far too many hours. So lots and lots of people issues that I think we need to make sure that we understand and address. And working from home is not for everybody. We don't all have the facilities to enable us to do it, and we will have local circumstances which may prohibit us doing that, and we've got to be able to accommodate all of those. So I think the clear message is there isn't one size fits all, but actually if you take your people with you, they'll tell you what's going to work for them, and you'll still get all that innovation.
But I do agree with the environmental impact point. Richard, do you want to just end for us here?
I will do. Yeah, I mean, just to very briefly go back to that point. I think in quite early on in our flexible workforce transition, we actually measured the saving, and we reckoned that we'd saved, I think, in the first couple of years, 136 million travelled miles a year, which we translated to 35,000 tonnes greenhouse gases just from our own people that we'd actually allowed to work from home. So the global effect of it is going to be significant. I think a couple of, I mean, I agree with everything everyone said. A couple of other points for us would be, I think we see a much bigger remote workforce as we go back, both for ourselves and for our customers and partners. The other thing that we've looked at and actually seen more is that it actually opens up a significantly expanded talent pool for us. If you don't bound work with a location, but you make it an outcome based, there's no reason why, to the point that Rob made earlier, I couldn't have a sales executive that's based in Singapore if they're prepared to work UK hours if they need to, or to have people that, you know, if you're a local authority or a NHS trust and it's a remote role, they don't have to be based geographically. So you've opened up a much bigger talent pool, but also a more inclusive workforce because you're not actually bounded by people that can travel to a location. So that's a significant thing for us. And again, I think it's just going to be a more flexible way of working. Like Peter, I've got people saying, I can't wait to get back. I've got people saying, can I stay at home? I think it's horses for courses a little bit.
Great. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Firstly, I'd like to thank Richard, Rob, Peter, and Laura for joining us today. And thank you for everyone who's tuned in to watch.